Hey everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of our zombie smashing game. So in the first video we were essentially just doing a lot of the setup and just getting our background and all of our zombies and the masks in, and today we'll actually start to maybe look at the code and try and put some behavior in the game. Okay, now really quickly I'm just going to go ahead and organize like we did last time. So I'm going to create an empty object, just call it masks, just so that we don't have a lot of these things here just redundantly lying around, pretty much just populating our hierarchy, and now it's a little bit easier and simpler. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the zombies and their behavior, and we talked about how essentially we are going to be moving their transform and bringing them up like so, making them move like here and then back down again. Okay, now, so to go ahead and do that, we're going to have to start looking into code and scripting. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder under our assets, and this is going to be where we keep our script. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. I'm going to call it scripts, and I'm going to go ahead and go inside scripts, and this is where we will create our first script. Now, before I go into and jump into the script, what I want to say is that the focus of this project is going to be try and keep things as beginner friendly as possible. I say that because a lot of the decisions that I'll be taking might not be the best in terms of optimization or the best in terms of good practices, but they are going to hopefully be a good sort of a starting introduction point into game development. So with that said, what we are going to do is we're going to be working towards creating a game manager. Okay, so a game manager is going to be basically a script which is going to be responsible for understanding what's happening in the game. It's going to be responsible for spawning our zombies, it's going to be responsible for keeping track of our health, and so on and so forth. And the way we're going to do this is we can right click here and we can do create a C# script, and we can call this game manager. Okay, now we can, to actually get a script to have impact within our scene, we need to actually put it in our scene, and the way we can do that is we can actually put it on a game object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty game object. I'm going to call it game manager, and I don't have to call it the same name. I just chose to do so because it's a little bit simpler to look for my game manager later on. But here I have an empty game object. Once again, I'm going to reset this. It doesn't matter in this case because this will not have any actual physical sort of representation in the world, but just for the sake of consistency. And then I can drag and drop this script onto my game manager. Notice how as soon as I dropped the script on here, it kind of popped up over here, very much like the transform component. So this is our way of basically creating a component. So there are certain components which we get in Unity, and then scripts can act as components, and you can basically attach them onto game objects. So it's not uncommon for a game object such as a player to have many different components for movement, different components for input, different components for audio, so on and so forth. Okay, so now that we have created the script, we can double click it and we can open it up in Visual Studios, and it usually takes a little bit, so give it a couple of seconds and I will show you once that script is up. Okay. Alright, so when I open up the game manager script, this is essentially something that you should be looking at. Okay, now this is a script, and inside this script there are two functions. That is the start function and that is the void function. Okay, and we'll talk about exactly what these functions do. Okay, so now conveniently it's already commented up here, but we'll talk about it anyway. So the start function is the function that runs the first time when the game object in the game is essentially activated. Okay, and the update function is going to run every single frame. So the best way for me to explain this to you is just to show it to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here in my start function and I'm going to do a debug log line, and I'm just going to write start. You can write like any string in here, right? Or any combination of characters. I'm going to Control S, save this script, right? And I'm going to jump back into Unity. Now, let's quickly talk about what's going to happen. This game manager has this game manager script, okay? So we look at this game manager script here, okay? And when I hit the play button, what's going to happen is the game manager is going to look for its script, and then it's going to play that message. So if I hit play now, as you can see here, that start message is shown. So if you click here, you can open your console here. Okay, it's opened on the other previous monitor, and it shows the start message twice simply because I had already checked it one time. So if I close it and if I play it again, you'll see the start message show up one time here. Okay, and you can just essentially dock the console right over here if I can figure it out. There we go. And if for some reason you cannot find the console, then you can go here in Windows and you can go in General and you can open the console from here as well. Okay, so the start function essentially runs the first time. And if I now move this debug line, okay, into update, and I'm just going to change this to update, and this is going to run every single frame. So now if I hit the play button, then this is just going to explode and just run every single frame, okay? So as you can see here, this number of debug lines is just increasing and increasing, and all of these updates here are happening, and this will continue to happen essentially until I stop. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear this, but hopefully that should give you an idea of start and update, and we're going to be using these functions quite extensively anyways. Okay, so what we said was that our game manager is very much going to be responsible for, you know, taking care of our zombies, spawning them, and, you know, making them move up and making them move down. And in order for our game manager to be able to do that, what we need is we need reference to our zombies in our script. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a public array of game objects. Okay, and we will, in that array, we will populate it with our zombies, and in such a way, in doing so, we will then have access to our zombies in code. So the way that would look like is it would look like a public game object array, okay, of zombies. Okay, so that is a public game object array of zombies, and when I save it now, right, I'm going to show you this, and this is going to be amazing. Okay, we let Unity refresh, and once it's ready, all right, so now that Unity has refreshed, it gives you the zombies option here in your game manager script, and you can click on it and it tells you to put in a size. Okay, so let's say if you were to say 5, then it means it's looking for 5 elements or 5 game objects, and if it's 50, then it's going to wait for 50 game objects. So the reason why this works the way it does is because we made this game object array of zombies public. Okay, if I make it private, then it will not show up in the inspector. Okay, so we'll wait for Unity to reload, and you'll notice that because I made zombies private now, it's not there. So putting something public is one of the ways in Unity where you can expose that field to the inspector, and if once you expose something to the inspector, it allows you to use some easy drag and drop operations to get references to those game objects. There's a wide variety of ways in which you can find the game objects, okay, but this is one of them, and this is the easiest one, so we'll stick with it for now. Okay, switching back, since I have changed it to public, it will go ahead and reload our last 50 size, and we'll change that to 7 because that is how many zombies we have. Okay, now we can go ahead and drag and drop our zombies. So starting here, 1 and 2 and let's see. So what I'm going to do is initially I'm just going to make it 0, and then I'll just go ahead and drag and drop here. There we go. Okay, and you have to drag it on top of the zombies word. So there we go. And one by one, essentially, not this one, let's go in order. Oops. Okay, let's go to our game manager again and keep dropping them. Okay. Okay, and one more. Okay. All right, so automatically, like we said, there are 7 zombies in the scene. We have dragged and dropped all of them, and now we have access to them. So essentially, for example, if we wanted access to them, then we could do something like zombies, arrow, 0, and this line of code here would essentially give us access to our first, zombie. So if you wanted to get access to it, we could do something like game object zombie equals zombie asterisk 0, and this would be our first zombie. Now we could, say zombie.setActive, zombie.move, or whatever it is that we wanted to do on the zombie. But anyways, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, so now we have access to all of our zombies. Okay, now jumping back into Unity real quick, how exactly are we going to do this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to define some rules in our game. So one of the things that happens in our game is that the zombies come up, they come to a certain point, and then they go back down, and only one zombie at a time is really active at any point in time. Okay, so we need a couple of things, right? We first need a way to choose between one of our 7 zombies, right? Once we have chosen the zombie, then we need to activate it and have it start moving upwards. And once it's moving upwards, we need to essentially, make it stop at a certain point and then make it go back down. Okay, so the first thing we can deal with really quickly is how to choose a random zombie and activate it. Okay, and for that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function. Okay, so we can write a private void pick new zombie, and this is going to be a function that we write. Okay, now in this function we are going to be essentially picking a zombie, and the way we can do that is we can use Unity's built-in random generator to generate a number between 1 and 7 essentially, and just activate that zombie. Okay, the other thing that we're going to have to do is once we activate a zombie, we're going to have to set some variables. So for example, one of the variables that we would need is going to be a private bool, let's see, is rising. Okay, and another one that we might need is private bool is falling. Okay, so we will use these variables to determine, hey, is it rising, is it falling, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now that we have is rising and is falling Boolean variables that we have already declared, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and initialize them to false. Okay, and we'll go ahead and change them to true programmatically later on, and we'll jump back into our pick new zombie function. Okay, now whenever we pick a new zombie, what it means is that it's now time to actually activate that zombie. So what we'll say is rising is equal to true, right? And we'll make is falling equals to false. Okay, so those two things we can just get out of the way. Okay, furthermore, what we need to do is now we need to generate a random number. Okay, and we can do that by creating a new variable. Okay, we'll call this zombie index, and we can generate a random number. Okay, so unity engine dot random dot range. Okay, so if you're wondering where I got this from, well, look, as soon as I stop, it gives me a tooltip, and it tells me that unity engine dot random dot range will return a random float number between the minimum and the maximum. So essentially it gives you a random number between two values, and this works for float numbers, right? So decimal point numbers, or it works for integers as well. And you just have to be careful on what is inclusive and what is exclusive. Okay, so once again, you can read here that it returns a random number between the minimum and the maximum exclusive. Okay, so having said that, we want to generate a number between 0 and 6 essentially. Okay, the reason why we want to do that is because our array over here, okay, so if you remember the zombies array, okay, switching back over here, notice how this element here is the 0 element, right, of our array. This is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So we want to generate numbers starting all the way from 0 up until 6. Okay, and remember that the length of this array is 7. Okay, so jumping back into our code here, what we want to do is we want to generate a number all the way from 0 to zombies dot length. Okay. Zombies dot length, essentially, it goes over here, it finds our array, and it just finds the length of that array. And zombies dot length in this case is 7. Therefore, it's going to generate a number between 0 and 6, because this function range does not count the upper value. It is exclusive. Okay, so this is going to generate a number between 0 and 6. Okay, so now we have the index of the zombie that we want to activate. Okay, so what we can do is we want to remember that information, and in order to do that, we can create another variable. Okay, so I'm going to go over here, I'm going to create a private integer, private int, and I'll call it active zombie index, and by default I'll make it 0. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and save this zombie index as my active zombie index. Okay, active zombie index equals to zombie index. All right, so what have we done so far? We set is rising to true because the zombie is going to be rising now, therefore it's not falling, therefore we set it to false. We generated a random number between 0 and 6, and we saved that as our active zombie index. Okay, we probably could have just done this in one step as well, right? If you want, you can just remove this and you can essentially call this active zombie index. Okay, that works as well. Okay, now we need to actually start moving it. So now that we've generated an active zombie index, i.e. we know which zombie we want to start moving, we need to do a couple of other things. Okay, the way we're going to be moving our zombies, like we've talked about on a couple of occasions, is we're essentially going to be moving them up and down like so. But before we move them, as you can see here, and I've disabled the masks, but as you can see here, all of these zombies have different starting positions, right? Especially their y-axis, i.e. the axis that we will be moving them on, is different. So before we start moving them, we want to remember this piece of information. We want to remember where they started. Specifically, we want to know what their y position was, because what we're going to do is we're going to remember the start position, and then we're going to arbitrarily move them a certain number of units up. Okay, so let's say if we move them, let's see, I don't know, 2 or 3 units up, but once they have moved 3 units up above their starting point, we're going to start making them fall down and make sure that they come back to their start position. Okay, so for that reason, remembering their start position is really important to us. Okay, now we can get their start position from their transform. Okay, so once I have my zombie index, so the zombie that I want to activate, I can find that zombie in my zombies array. So in order to do that, what I can do is if I do zombies dot active zombie index, okay, so this here, this line of code, this gives me my active zombie. Okay, and I know that it's giving me an error. That's because it's you know, I'm not actually equating it yet to a game object. But essentially, for the sake of explanation, when I go in my array and when I give it this index, then it's giving me that zombie. Okay, what I want to do is I want the transform of that game object. So just for the sake of explanation, let's go ahead and create a game object. So game object zombie equals zombie, and we'll call this active zombie. Okay, so this gives us the active zombie that we will eventually activate. Okay, now we want the transform. So what we can do is, let's say, I don't know, transform dot, and we'll call it active transform, and I will get rid of this, but I will, just for the sake of explanation, I will go ahead and show you this. So I can do active zombie dot transform, and that will give me the transform. Okay, and now what I need is the position. Okay, so notice how over here there is inside the transform, there is a position, which is an X, Y, and Z. Notice that because this is a 2D game, we don't necessarily need the Z. Okay, so we can just use, you know, 2-dimension vectors. Okay, so what I can do is I can create a new variable. I can call it, or I can give it the type vector2. I can say start position, and I can say active transform. So I can take the transform of the active zombie and I can do position. Okay, and in doing all of this, I basically get the start position of the zombie which we are going to activate. Okay, now I could have just as easily done this very differently. I could have done, if I comment this line out, okay, I could have done vector2 dot, in fact, let's do it a little bit differently. Since we want to remember the start position, let's declare it over here at the top of the script. Okay, we'll do private vector2 start position. Okay, and we'll call the start position by default. We'll just give it 0.0f. Okay, or in fact, you know what? It's not a float, so we'll just leave it as start position. Okay, and over here in pick new zombie, what we can do is start position equals, okay, zombies. We in the array zombies, we're looking for the zombie with this index, okay, dot transform dot position, and boom. Okay, so essentially we did the same thing, right? Over here we first found the active zombie, then we did dot transform, so we did dot transform, then we did over here dot position, and therefore dot position. So we can kind of quickly do that, and all this amounts to the same thing. Okay, all right, so now we have found out which zombie we are going to essentially activate, and we also know its starting position. Okay, moving forward, we will essentially be looking at the logic for moving this zombie up and down. Okay, I think this is a good starting. So now we have found the zombie that we want to activate, and that's the zombie that will be moving up and down. I think this is a good stopping point, and I think we've just learned a lot of new things. So let's take a deep breath, and we'll come back in the next video and start off here.